I'm wearing all of these pins. Just saying.
What pin do you have?
Be careful, that might exceed your squat limit. Angie,
In your box.
that many pins might exceed your limit of squat weight. Your squat weight, you know, the weight of the pins, you may not be able to
But
squat.
you gave Angie
Oh,
an idea. You really
squatting.
Squatting, weightlifting.
It will.
Eric gave me one too. Let's just say I don't have it on either.
You wear a Viking pin?
Oh, shoot. Can I still wear it? Gave it to Angie.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry.
You want it, Quinn?
I meant
I'm gonna make a mural.
Who makes this? Who makes this?
Somebody who's got too much time on their hands.
All right, I have to change my sweater. You got a minute, 1 minute.
30 seconds.
You're fast. You're speedy. What on earth did you do to your fingers? That's awesome. That's just a shoot. Okay, Lisa, are we ready?
Different time.
Almost.
Get some paint thinner.
Small thing, just a small thing. I got it on Start Video. It's on Black Magic. Everybody's smarter than me. Well, most everyone in here.
Not hardly, Lisa.
Nope. When the last time I figured it out?
We didn't get any new emails, did we? Public comment.
Change it to none.
Amy, TG. Oh,
That's fine.
didn't catch that one.
Okay, we're good.
All right. Okay, welcome everybody to the South Weaver City Council meeting of February 9th, 2021. It's 6:01 p.m. and all council members are in attendance. I want to make the public aware that 2 Planning Commission members have resigned, Tim Grubb and Rob Osborne. As a result, I've amended the agenda and removed item number 4 concerning Planning Commission membership. I want to thank both Tim and Rob for their many years of dedicated service to this community. And please know that we are working to have those positions filled before our next Planning Commission meeting on March 11th. We will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance by me, and then we'll have a prayer by Councilman Halverson. Please stand. Please repeat. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I
dear Father in heaven, as we come before thee this night, we're so very thankful for the opportunity we have to gather here in this building and for those who are able to watch remotely. We're thankful for the city and the country which we live in and the freedoms which we have. Father, we're especially thankful for our emergency people and our staff and all that they do for us. And we ask you to watch over and protect them and especially our military and our armed forces who protect our freedoms. Be with them and their families that they might all return home in safety. Father, we ask for thy spirit to be with us this evening, that we might make wise decisions for our community and for our city and for all those who we represent, that we may be mindful of how our decisions affect them in all of our daily lives. Again, we thank thee for all that we have, and we love thee very much. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilman Halverson. All right, we'll move to our public comment. Please state your name and address when you come to the pulpit, and individuals may speak for 3 minutes or less. Please address the entire council and know that we will not be responding at this time. We're now open for public comment.
Paul Sturm, 2527 Deer Run Drive. My first comment is a general comment. I would like to thank the City Council and staff for the opportunity to attend the South Weber City Council and Staff Retreat on Saturday, 30 January 21 at the Legacy Event Center. The presentations were very informative, as well as were the questions asked, the interaction amongst participants, and the answers, solutions provided. The next topic has to do with agenda item 4, which is blue stakes. And it's part of exhibit A, which was a request for proposals and agenda. The general reason that I'm doing this right now is I wanted to make sure that a lot of the various factors regarding the street lights in general, not just the blue stakes portion, are being considered. The paragraph has raised several general questions about current and future actions by South Weber City regarding its streetlights. These are: 1, does South Weber City get charged by Rocky Mountain Power for blue stake services for RMP-owned streetlights when one of their streetlights has a blue stake call? Or is this cost incorporated into the monthly RMP charge for the streetlights? RMP has location identification placards on its poles. Does South Weber have similar systems to identify a particular streetlight and its exact location that is being serviced by blue stakes or stake center as is being proposed? Is it possible to have the South Weber City streetlight map, packet page 23 of 62, updated to identify the location of the RMP-owned streetlights? This would greatly assist the city while in the process of identifying all current eligible RMP-owned and maintained streetlights during the process of them being taken over, purchased by the city. Number 4, does the city have an implementation schedule and an estimated cost for taking over all current eligible RMP-owned and maintained streetlights? Has this been budgeted yet? The word eligible would also seem to indicate that some of the RMP-owned streetlights, X out of 230, cannot be taken over or purchased by South Weber City. Is this the case? And number 5, since the city receives approximately 800 tickets annually for all city-owned infrastructures from blue stakes, will the conversion to city-owned streetlights impact this number? Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Paul.
Corinne Johnson, 8020 South, 2500 East. So I wanted to make a few comments as you guys are going to be discussing Planning Commission tonight, that SWCU ran an unofficial poll, and yes, it is very unofficial, but I thought you might be interested in some of the results. So Lacey put this up just asking about the fact that there are going to be changes to the Planning Commission coming and a few scenarios and suggestions or thoughts of things that could change. So she added a shorter term and said that currently it's 5 years. There were 67 members of the group that said that that was something that's important to them. 7-member Planning Commission with no alternates. There were 24 respondents to that. There were 6 people who agreed that we need changes, but were unsure what those changes should be. There were 4 that said we need to leave it as is for now and correct the problem from the top. And then 3 people said they were actually interested in serving on the Planning Commission, which is awesome. And then a 7-member Planning Committee with 2 being alternatives was the last option. Well, actually, there's one more after that. That was 2 votes. And then the Planning Committee is doing a great job. No changes necessary, received 0 votes. So as I was reading through the comments and looking through this poll, one of the main comments and things that was really made was that shorter term. That got the most responses, and that we need to really look at a shorter term for our Planning Commission. And I personally feel that that's something that would be important to our city. I also personally really like the idea of 7. I think the opportunity to open up the commission to more residents and have more voices on the commission. I know there were many times when only a quorum is able to attend that Planning Commission meeting, and then decisions of recommendations and discussions with developers and things happen with 3 members, and then 3 members vote. And that has happened several times on important things. And for example, that happened with the loft. So I also wanted to point out that with this opportunity to expand the Planning Commission to more people, I think there will be lots of citizens who will be excited and interested in serving. Just in our poll, there were 3 that said they were interested. And it is something that may seem like you'll need a lot of experience or need to know what's going on. But if I can just remind the council that only about 1.5 years ago, me, myself, many other hundreds of people in our city had never looked at an agenda, had never looked at minutes of a meeting, had never pulled up the website, had no idea what a general plan was, land use, codes, none of it. And we were within a matter of weeks and months able to familiarize ourselves with our city because we were interested and engaged and we wanted to help. And I imagine that any person that wanted to serve on a Planning Commission would come to a position with that type of energy and enthusiasm to learn our city and be involved and make a difference. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Fran.
Fran. Any further public comment? Did we have any online? Dave?
No.
Lisa? Sorry. Okay. All right. Thank you to all those who participated. We will move to our next item, which is Resolution 21-05, Award Streetlight Blue Stakes Contract. South Weaver currently has 61 city-owned streetlights. Even though the power for these streetlights comes from Rocky Mountain Power, Rocky Mountain Power will not mark blue stake any service lines to a streetlight that they do not own. Blue staking is where a utility company will spray paint or mark with small flags on the ground to show where their service line is located underground. This is done as a notification to anyone digging in the area in an effort to prevent damage to their line. Since the city is now maintaining their own streetlight system, they need to provide blue staking for these service lines. South Weaver City publicly solicited for proposals for blue staking services. The deadline for submission was January 15th. The city received 3 proposals from the following companies: Apex Locating, CNC Locating, Stake Center Locating. An evaluation committee consisted of Dave Larson, City Manager, Mark Larson, Public Works Director, Brian Wageman and Mark Johnson of Public Works, and Brandon Jones, the City Engineer. The proposals were received and scored by each committee member. The scores were then compiled, and the committee met on January 21st to review the compiled proposal scores and discuss a recommendation. After scoring and discussion were complete, the committee unanimously decided to recommend award of the contract to Stake Center Locating. All right, comments or questions?
May I have a question before we get into the specifics of this recommendation? For staff, we have water lines, we have sewer lines, or excuse me, we have water lines and storm drain lines that the city owns and maintains. How do we go about marking those? And how is this any different than what we're currently having to mark for blue sticks callouts? And why can't they be all taken care of with the same service?
Can you address that, Brendan?
I'll take a stab at it. I don't do the blue stakes, and I'm not an expert as exactly how they do it, but my understanding is that with these are electrical lines, and so the equipment that the guys use for communication lines and electrical lines and things like that is different than the equipment that what our guys use for sewer, water, storm drain, those types of things.
It's my understanding that we don't have a contractor for our own lines, that we do that. In this case, it's just a skill, a technique for that type of line that our current staffing does not have. And so we need to contract it out.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask a follow-up question then. If we're doing our own, but we don't have the equipment to do the electrical lines, did anyone do a cost analysis with regards to purchasing equipment and doing it ourselves versus hiring it out? And what's the payback? If we were to buy the equipment ourselves, would it pay for itself within 7 years or less?
That was not looked at least.
No,
that know
I
of.
guess we did not discuss that in detail. No, the billing. My understanding was that the Public Works did not feel they had either the equipment or the skills or whatever to perform that work, and that would be better for us to contract for.
So if I hear you correctly, we're don't have the resources to extend further for blue staking locations because of all the other assignments that are going on. This is just one too many things in the pot, and it'd be easier for us to hire it out than to do it ourselves.
I would say that that's part of it, yes, and that's a major part of it.
Is some of it due to that we're dealing with high voltage versus low voltage? I mean, I'm just, to do a storm line, a water line, you hook onto a wire that's not live whatsoever.
Right.
You understand that better than anybody, Wayne. And then these were actually they tie onto a live wire.
That's, again, I don't know that I'm
That's
not
the way I
knowledgeable
understand
enough
it,
to know exactly how they do it. So I don't want to pretend like I know that, but that was my understanding, is that we didn't have in-house the equipment or the skill set to do it.
I ask these questions because being on the Municipal Utilities Committee, we didn't have a chance to vet this or having this dialogue. So I appreciate the feedback.
Sure.
If the council is concerned about that and wants more of an explanation, then you always have the option to continue this item, and we can look into that and talk with Public Works more directly about that idea. In the process from the very beginning, Public Works did not ever express the desire to be involved in the blue staking for this, and we never asked that question directly. So if that is a question you want answered, we can do that. If you feel like the answer given is satisfactory, then of course you have the option to
I
proceed.
guess my question would be today, before continuing the discussion, would be, in your opinion, is the city getting good, valuable consideration by hiring this services out versus doing it ourselves?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
the cost provided and the expertise was very clear through the evaluation process, and I think that the city gets great value based on the contract that's before you.
Thank you.
The hourly cost on the selected contract, I think, is probably comparable to what our own cost would be if you look at the rate.
Mhm.
And so that's why I felt it was okay.
Well, and in addition, if I can add, just the per ticket cost is only
low.
$15.
Yeah, it's low.
So it's a very good rate. In fact, it arguably may be cheaper to have these guys than for our own guys to do it. We didn't do that analysis, so I'm not saying that that's the case, but for the expertise and the cost, it feels like we're getting good value for this.
So I have two comments, questions. One, follow up with what Wayne's saying. As we take over the rest of the city, though, I think we ought to look at the possibility of getting our own equipment when we have how many ever thousand we need to be doing or whatnot.
Brandon knows the numbers better than I do, but there are currently the 61 that we own, that we've installed just this last summer based on recent development. The next step in the process is to then replace lights throughout the city that are owned by Rocky Mountain Power. And we've got a plan that we're looking at on that, and we've got cost estimates and all of that as part of the budget process this year to determine the speed of replacement and how much it's going to cost. We know the dollar amount to do it all at one time. I don't think that is a possibility based on resources, but that's something that the Utilities Committee has been looking at and will be part of the budget process. It's not thousands of lights. I think it's somewhere around 200 the total number of street lights in the city is in the hundreds, not in the thousands.
So there may not be necessarily a break-even point where it makes sense for us to take it over. It
Yeah,
may be
we
cost-effective
can-
to contract it the whole time.
Yeah.
It may be, but that's a really valuable question and a valuable point. I don't know, to Brandon's statement, I don't know the cost of equipment or things like that, but we can absolutely look into that and see if there is a point where we'd have enough blue staking calls that it would make sense for us to purchase equipment. Again, I don't know the cost of that.
Well, and if there's a safety concern that Blair brings up, that's another point.
Yeah.
Regardless of how this goes tonight, if the council's moving to approve this, I would like the council to understand, I have concern with the terms of the contract being 3 years and then renewable year to year thereafter. There's no end. My comfort level of going anything over 5 years is, I think we need to go back out and reconsider other companies every 5 years at a minimum if they're providing good service or not. But to have a no end contract, year to year contract thereafter, I can't approve something like that. So just so you know where I'm at with the terms on this thing.
I noticed the 3 years, but is it automatically renewable every year?
Agreement may be renewed annually thereafter.
But I assumed that it may, so I felt like that left that up to us. Is that different?
It's at the city's option to renew.
So it'll
So
come
does-
before the council every year thereafter.
I didn't interpret it that way. I think that my understanding would be that it would, assuming they were continuing to provide good service, it would be reviewed annually. But if it didn't feel like there was a need to go out, then we wouldn't need to. But if you want to have if you're more comfortable with a hard required, 5-year term, we don't have any concern with doing it that way.
I would say that even with the terms as the way they are, that doesn't preclude us from at 3 years or 4 years or 5 years to go out for bid again and to make that competitive again, to just check the waters and make sure that we're still getting the best value.
Right.
My concern is in 3 years, will we all remember what we talked about here today and bring it back? I would rather have some sort of hard stop that says at 3 years, it'll come back, or we go out for proposals again and make another. I'm good to go to 5 years, but I don't like an open-ended agreement or relying upon someone to remember 3 years down the road to bring it back and ask that question again.
Sure, that's fair.
Can we just add for council's review after the 3 years?
I'd be fine with that.
Do you want it to come to you? Okay.
Not me.
I mean, the council.
You, Blair.
Just me, Brandon.
Sorry.
I mean, it could even come back to the Municipal Utilities Committee, whoever that is at that time. I'm okay with that too,
Yeah.
and make the recommendation to the council. I just, that way it's an easy reminder.
Yeah.
It's a very valuable point you bring up, Wayne, that we don't want to put ourselves into a position where we have some perpetual contract that we don't pause to make sure we check and see that we're still getting good value. And the idea of an open bid, an open process, every period of time, whether that's 3 years or 5 years or some other, depending on the type of service, that's a valuable practice, and that's a good practice. So if there's a trigger we can put in there that helps us, I think that's a very fair point.
So my other question is more just education. I mean, in the document here, it says there's sometimes that ours weren't even marked and some damage occurred. How does it even work when we're in charge of it? When I call Blue Stake, do they contact the city? If,
Mhm.
and how do you know?
They,
Because,
they send Blue Stake sends a notice to the utility company, whoever owns that utility, and then that utility goes out and does the Blue Stakes, whether they hire a third party or do it themselves.
so I guess the question is, then why weren't ours marked? I mean, if, were we just not notified or were we not?
No, we
Out
didn't,
and
we
doing it.
didn't have the ability to do so.
So we'd get notified, but we couldn't mark them.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, then do I have a motion on resolution 21-05?
Getting there. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve resolution 2125 to award the street light Blue State contract to CNC Locating and, no,
Mm-mm.
Stake
Stake
Center.
Center.
Stake Center Locating. Is that the right one?
Yep.
With the provision that the terms of the agreement come back to the Municipal Utilities Committee after 3 years.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Next item, Resolution 21-06, Mutual Aid Agreement with Weber Fire District. Fire knows no boundaries, and therefore the fire districts must be flexible in aiding the surrounding communities. A mutual aid agreement outlines the conditions and responsibilities when additional help is needed. South Weber has agreements with many agencies. An agreement with Weber Fire was entered into 2012, and last year an agreement with multiple entities, included Weber Fire District, was approved. As Uinta City recently contracted with Weber Fire District to provide their fire protection, it becomes more likely that South Weber and Weber Fire could be requested to assist each other. This is an update of the agreement to cover that likelihood. Are there comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, then do I have a motion to approve Resolution 21-06?
Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2106 to approve.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Good enough.
Oh, sorry.
No,
did I
you're
cut
good.
you off?
Nope, you're good. Done.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further comment?
I second.
No,
Wait, what?
I seconded it.
That's your comment.
Oh, sorry.
You seconded it.
All right. Hearing none, then we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilman Windsor.
Aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item is Resolution 21-07, Amendments number 5 and number 6 to Animal Care Services Contract. The city entered a contract for animal services with Davis County in 2016, which included annual amendments to adjust compensation. The contract was to expire after 5 years, which will be December 31st, 2020. The county has asked for an additional year to prepare a new contract as they research their options for a new facility. The county issued Amendment number 5 to extend the expiration to January 31st, 2021, while they prepared a new amendment. Amendment number 6 includes the rates for the upcoming year. The county discontinued wildlife services as of July 2020, so the city's cost dropped from $849.75 in 2020 to $51.50 in 2021. Additionally, our city's usage rate dropped from 1.66% to 1.6407%, decreasing our portion of the overall Davis County animal care and control budget. However, the budget amount went up. 2021 total will be $20,899.59 and is paid in monthly installments. In 2020, the cost was $20,673.57, so the overall increase is $226.02. Comments or questions?
I have a question. So our wildlife services, is somebody else taking that over, or are they just not offering them anymore?
That was my question.
They are simply not offering them anymore. The idea is that similar to some other surrounding counties for that, for example, a raccoon or things like that, rather than animal control being involved, you just have to go to a private company. And that was a conscious decision that they made to step out of that business for those types of calls. So if you do call animal control for that type of thing, then they would direct you to companies that provide that, but they would not provide that service.
So that's just for like nuisance wildlife calls?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it mostly is related to raccoon calls because that was becoming a large thing for them. And I was not involved in those conversations. I don't know what went into that decision, but
They're all in my backyard.
I'm sure Angie's got to have some.
I've got a lot.
Other questions?
Just a clarification on it says the county asked for an additional year to prepare, but we've got a new contract here in a month. So are they bringing something back at the end of the year as well? Or they just asked for an additional month?
No, the idea is that there are conversations taking place about the funding model and the funding structure and the organizational structure of animal care and control in the county. And because of those fundamental conversations that are taking place, they anticipate a change and will communicate with the cities as they go through that conversation. But their hope was to have that in place before this contract came up. They didn't get there because of some personnel changes and things that took place there at Animal Control. And so they're simply acknowledging that they anticipate a change in the future. And this is to get them through this year for that period of time so they can hopefully have a different contract, a different structure moving forward. Did that answer the
I
question?
think it's the date on there that Quinn's asking about.
If you look at it, there's two amendments though, one to amend the 2020 and one for 2021.
Yeah.
Yes, they were extending the previous year's contract a month, and then there's a second contract for this year to go through the remainder of this year.
That's Exhibit 2, Addendum 6.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. As I went through, it looks like we're getting, a good deal out of it. They said that their costs were going up 11.5% and we're only being charged an extra 5%. Is that the way you understand it?
That's how I read it as well.
Okay.
And that's kind of in part due to the discontinuation of the wildlife services, right? That could bring us.
Well, even if they hadn't taken that out, it was only a 5% increase of what it would have been with that
That's
in
true.
place. So,
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, some of that is call volume. The fact that they base it on call volume is a factor there. The wildland is a small factor. But yeah, that we did not take that same level of cost increase as others did throughout the county.
Okay, any other comments? And do I have a motion to approve Resolution 21-07 Amendments number 5 and number 6 to Animal Care Services Contract?
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve Resolution 21-07, Amendment number 5 and 6 to Interlocal Agreement 2016-324 to contract for animal services with Davis County Animal Care and Control.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further comment? All right, then we'll have a roll call vote beginning with Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
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 The motion carries. Thank you. Resolution 21-08, Agreement for Municipal Election Services. Every 2 years, municipal elections are held. Davis County provides the expertise and services necessary to hold our election. Several fees have increased, including programming costs, canvass preparation, web support, election administrative support, and database setup. The increased number of registered voters also increases costs about $1.50 per voter. The estimated cost per election is $8,651.35 compared to $7,155.28 in 2019. If both a primary and a general election are held, the total estimate is $17,302.70. Any questions? Then do I have a motion to approve Resolution 21-08?
Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 21-08, agreement for municipal election services.
And do I have a second?
I'll
Second.
Wow, 3 of them. I heard Angie the loudest, so we'll take hers. All right. Any further comments?
Just one clarification, even though we're approving this contract, these are monies that will be budgeted in the fiscal year 22 budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilman Windsor.
Aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thanks. All right, we'll move to our discussion items. First one is City Code Title 10, Chapter 3, Planning Commission, Sections 3, Terms of Office, and 4, Organization. In light of previous conversations regarding the Planning Commission and at the direction of the City Council, staff has developed options regarding the number of members on Planning Commission and the terms of service. Those options are presented for Council to deliberate and consider. In determining the makeup and tenure of the Planning Commission, Council should address the following. Number 1, shall the terms of Planning Commission be 3 years or 5 years? 2, shall the Planning Commission consist of 5 members or 7 members? 3, shall alternates be included if the Planning Commission consists of 5 members? 4, shall the Planning Commissioners be limited to 2 or 3 consecutive terms of service? And 5, shall the Chair and Vice Chair of the Planning Commission be limited to 2 consecutive years in that position? Accordingly, staff has prepared the following options for the Council to weigh and consider. Option 1, 5 members, 5-year terms of service. Option 2, 5 members, 3-year terms of service. Option 3, 7 members, 5-year terms of service. Option 4, 7 members, 3-year terms of service. And I want to turn the time over to Dave and or Sherry for additional information for us to consider.
Thanks, Mayor. After the packet and material went out, there was some additional research that was done. There was a question from Councilmember Soderquist that triggered some additional research. And earlier this morning, staff was able to provide in a memo some of that research that was done in a compilation of comparison of other cities and what they do, as well as some analysis of that and a little bit more explanation of the options that are provided in the packet there. Ultimately, staff was able to receive information from 32 other cities on how they operate planning commissions, and was able to compare the based on those questions that were asked in the beginning of the packet, the number of members, the terms of service, term limits, the years of service, all of those types of things. And ultimately, the hope was that you were able to take a look at that before tonight. If not, I will take a minute and just do a quick summary of that material for you and for the public. We asked specific questions to these cities, and were able to receive a whole bunch of information. And ultimately, most of the commissions in the state range between 7 members and 5 members. 7 was the most popular number, although 5 was also a very popular number. There were very few that were different than 7 or 5. In the memo, there's a lot of information about why cities picked the numbers that they did, and it varies from city to city. Some felt very strongly about alternates and felt it was a wonderful idea to have alternates. Others felt very strongly about not having alternates and were frustrated by alternates. And ultimately, that becomes just a decision of how our city would like to operate. Based on, well, I'll get to that in a second. There were also a number of lessons learned. There was a question asked about what are things that have been learned through experiences with Planning Commission, and some common themes that we were able to pull out of those responses were the importance of having bylaws. We currently do not have specific bylaws for our Planning Commission, and the best practice there seems to be that the council in city code puts some specific parameters in place as far as those questions that we're asking: how many members, length of term, term limits, those types of things. And then the Planning Commission establishes a set of bylaws that maybe further defines the roles and responsibilities of maybe the chair and the vice chair, some of those types of things that the council doesn't necessarily dictate to them their own operating procedures, but the city code does dictate the organizational structure. And so one of the best practices was to have bylaws. City staff is already looking at drafting that and preparing that to help the Planning Commission to adopt that once we have a Planning Commission back organized again. One of the other best practices was to have regular training, not just an onboarding process and a orientation process, but then regular and ongoing training. And there are resources out there that we've been able to tap into. Staff is preparing some of that training material for the new members and current members of Planning Commission. And we believe that we'll be able to customize that to our own needs as well, and have kind of the joint use there of resources that are already out there. There's a Land Use Academy of Utah. The Utah League of Cities and Towns also has some resources that we can tie into for training. One of the other best practices that we notice is representation throughout the community. It seemed to be a common theme to not have Planning Commission members all from one area of the city or all with the same expertise or background, to try to vary and create a diverse group of individuals that can look at issues from all types of angles. The memo provides some of the specific comments that they make surrounding that. Ultimately, those questions that are asked as far as 3-year versus 5-year, term limits or not, 5 members versus 7 members. Staff has looked into that, and we do provide our own recommendation based on the information that we gained and our own personal experiences there. Same with the question of alternates versus no alternates, and so there's some analysis in that document as far as the pros and cons concerned with that. The last thing that we looked at specifically was term limits and whether there should be term limits. I was surprised, honestly, looking at the results of how many cities had no term limits for Planning Commission and just had that be open-ended. Others, everybody that did have term limits seemed to be either 2 terms or 3 terms. And that was somewhat directly tied, although they didn't state it. It seemed to be a correlation between how long the term was and whether they had 2 terms or 3 terms. If it was a shorter term, they seemed to allow 3 terms. If it was a longer term, they seemed to allow only 2 terms. But it always seemed to hit in the window of between 8 and 10 years somewhere, as far as the ending period of having somebody be on the commission. If they I believe there was one city that only allowed a 1-year or a 1-term limit. And I believe their length of term was either 4 or 5 years. I think it was 4 years. And I found that interesting. And their specific reasoning was simply to have lots of people be able to serve and really rotate that through the community. So ultimately, based on all of those things, staff provides a recommendation to the council that you can agree with or disagree with, however you feel, and you can talk through the merits of that. Staff recommends 5 members without alternates, either 4 or 5-year terms with a 2-term limit, and then a 1-year term for the chair and the vice chair, so that would rotate. I know there are differing opinions out there, but that memo provides some reasoning and some thinking behind why staff is sharing that. At the same time, even with that recommendation, there is clearly flexibility on that, and there's merit for moving off of that recommendation. It's not a hard, fast, professional expertise that is making that recommendation. It's an analysis of the comparison of how other cities do it, trying to incorporate best practices, and ultimately trying to customize to our needs and our size and our demographic and that type of a thing. But we hope that that's a starting point for the council to consider answers to those questions.
All right, thank you, Dave. I was thinking maybe we ought to go through these one by one, maybe one at a time. So is the council okay with that? If we start with terms, the length of a term for planning commission members, is that okay to start with that? Okay,
I'm okay with it. They may get tied together a little bit.
right.
Thank you.
'cause
Yeah, I think that's the only way.
Might
you
have
can
to do
start.
with, yeah,
Yeah.
how many. Well, let's just begin there though. Council, are there comments or questions?
We have nothing to say.
There's lots that could be said here, Mayor, and I appreciate what the effort the staff's gone to. Leading up to this morning, I had also done a lot of research and compliment a lot of the research that the staff has done. My focus is more on Class 5 cities. The data that was presented to this body in that memo, the 32 cities looked at Class 4, 3, and a couple Class 2 cities as well. My focus on Class 5 didn't change the information too much. The 20 that I looked at, 50% had commissions of 7, 35% had commissions of 5, and then there was a commission of 8, and a commission of 4, and a commission of 6 or something like that. So there's some outliers there. So no hard, fast rules when it comes to that. But what I did in my research found out there's code changes, and I think that's what we're focusing on here with these questions, but there's also policy. And that's what staff was talking about at first in regards to the bylaws, the training, and there's a lot of different training out there and providing to the commissions. The citywide representation was another one that came out, and diversity in the fields, but establishing written process. I think the policy aspect, whenever we get this commission set up, really, that should be some of the first things that come back to us is some policy not code, but some policy statements, some bylaws, some direction as to how they're going to function and move forward. For instance, might be a zoning change needs to be presented 30 days before the planning commission is actually going to meet to hear that. So they have time to review, understand it. And then once they make a recommendation, that recommendation needs to be brought back here, probably by the chairman of the planning commission, in order to present what they discussed to the city council. City council can hold a hearing 15, that could be like 15 to 21 days after the planning commission takes a look at it. And then once the city council has that public hearing, they can make a decision, and that decision is final. Those type of processes, I think if they were spelled out in clarity, would really streamline the administration aspect that the planning commission, I think, has been wanting and yearning to have. But to your question, the code aspects, 7, 5, I'll just cut to the chase. With all the research I've done, I think we want to go to a 7-member commission. I think there's something to say about that with regards to having a minimum of 4 votes to make any motion or a pass. I think if you tie those two together, so you have to have at least 4 to a quorum, or you can have 5 to a quorum, but you have to have 4 votes to make any motion pass. It's not the majority. I think we need to distinguish that here tonight as to what that means if it's a 5-member or 4-member commission. But if we go with 7, 5 years is too long. I think it has to be much shorter. I would recommend 3, but I'd be okay with a 4, but 2 terms. So if you can't just talk about one without talking at the other. So if I put the whole 3 together, well, I'll put the whole 4 together. 7 members, 3 years, 2 terms, no alternates. That's what I would pitch out there to the council.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Yes, Haley.
So I also did a lot of research over the weekend. I specified really right into our own kind of population sizes. I have about 15 cities here, and 14 of which have 7-member councils. All of them sit in roughly our same population sizes. And I was really trying to figure out if one of the concerns that kept getting brought up with 7-member council or commission was we're too small for that. And I think that's clear. I mean, Ephraim, Far West, Harrisville, Sunset, Clearfield, Uinta, or no, not Uinta, sorry. But anyway, there's a lot of smaller cities that have had 7-member commissions, and they've had them for decades. And so I think I wouldn't exclude us doing 7 members on planning commission just because we're a smaller city. I don't think that that's valid. I kind of thought of some other things. A lot of it lines up right with what Wayne was saying as well. Some other things that I saw that I thought were interesting that we could implement was changing a quorum from 3 members to 4. A lot of other cities had done that. 2 others ideas I had, as I know, alternates. I thank you, Sherry, for everything that you put out, and Dave. I agree with all the concerns that they mentioned on alternates. I also had concerns about how to keep them interested, how to keep them participating, how to keep them, invested, but at the same time also needing them. And just as Corinne brought up in her statement, we 3-member commissions that were making decisions that might be more helpful to have more voices at the table. There was some other interesting ways that other cities did it. That 2 of them that I wrote down was if you do a 4-member quorum, that requires 4 members to be there. And then either the chair takes more of a mayoral role and votes in the event of a tie, or the liaison to the council who is there would vote in the event of a tie. So in that case, there would always be 5 members voting if needed, but at least 4 members always present, 5 with the liaison. A lot of them did it as far as I wrote down they have 1 term on, 1 term off, or 2 terms off, and then 1 term on, 2 terms off. We were trying to kind of do the math on that, and so that was something that I researched. That it is either 2, 1 goes off, 2 goes off the next year. Am I making sense? Hold on, let me say this a little slower. If we were to implement this right now in 2021, 1 would go off. In 2022, 2 terms would end. In 2023, 1 term would end. In 2024, 2 terms, and then 1 term. So you kind of stack it that way. Or the other way they did it was 2 terms, then 3 terms, then 2 terms. So that was how you kind of rotate them out. I kind of like the idea of the first a little bit, just because it kind of keeps a little bit more consistency with members who've been there longer. I absolutely agree with all of the trainings. I think that we could do a lot better giving them their training. I was able to talk to a couple of commissioners. Taylor was one of them who had a lot of great ideas and insights. And I think one of the other things that I think a 7-member commission would do better with is also help with the general plan participation. Having 7 members being able to reach out to the public would go a lot further than just 5. And I think we really just need a little bit better communication between our council and our commission. So I think I agree a lot with what Wayne is saying, and Dave, of these bylaws or these policies where we're able to kind of set up the code of it. But I would very much encourage the planning commission to be able to sit down and maybe either put it on the agenda as something to discuss as far as what they want their policy to be, perhaps as an agenda item or as a committee, but also an agenda item of what they would like to refer to the liaison, so that he or she is able to come back to council of what they want, or codes that they feel that we need. I feel like there's lots of good ideas between the 2, but they're missing a bridge between them. So those are just kind of my thoughts. I just feel that the 7-member commission would serve us well with 3-year terms, 2 terms, and then you can come on for another try after the first term. Another thing I do think that we should clarify in our code is if somebody fills an appointed role, some specify exactly if that was a year or more, that's considered a term. If it's less than a year, that they could go on for another term. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I think we should specify that in our code if that's something that we're concerned about as far as finishing out somebody else's role. So I think that is most of my stuff.
Wayne and Haley, since we are talking about all of these together, and I'm sorry, maybe did I hear it? As far as the chair, how long can a chair serve? What are your opinions on that?
You know, I go back and forth on that personally. I like the idea of having a chair and then vice chair. The next year, the vice chair's chair, and kind of rotating through that way. It's another one of those things that I'm kind of hesitant to do as in code. I feel that the planning commission should have a little bit of influence on that, and maybe written into their bylaws. I think we definitely need to address the terms of a chair. I'm a little hesitant at how specific to get. I feel like the planning commission should be able to weigh on that more so than the code.
Yeah, I concur. I don't think that's a code issue. I think that's more of a policy that could be set up in the bylaws. I would encourage a limit to the chair, vice chair, be it 1 or 2 years, but no more than 2 years consecutive. Being a 7-member, if that's the way we go, commission, there'd be opportunity. If you got a real good chair, they could take a year off and then they could be right back into that role again if that commission felt that was in the best interest of. I do like the idea of giving other people an opportunity, but I'm with Alien with regards to if you got someone who's just doing an outstanding job, why limit that role if they're really good at chairing meetings? But on the other hand, I understand the setbacks if one person is controlling that discussion. So to me, it's not a code issue, it's a policy issue, and I think we put it in the bylaws.
Okay, thank you. All right, other comments, council? Gwen, do you want to?
Go ahead, Andy.
So I have thought a lot about this and had some discussion on this too. I'm not 100% sold on a 7-member commission. And I think there's some good points that have been brought up and good arguments for it. But I just truly don't know that we really want our planning commission meetings to have 7 members discussing it. It would significantly increase the length of the meetings to start with. Because I feel like if every member does not get to voice their opinion, then we're doing them a disservice, right? That's a disservice to them. It's a disservice to the community. So adding 2 more people lengthens the meetings, which is just something to consider. I don't know that we will always have enough public interest to always fill 7 seats. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But I really feel like if we had 5 still and did 3-year terms, to renew it for 2 terms. And I'm even okay adding, throwing this option out there of just having a 6-member commission with one of them as an alternate and they rotate alternates. So for example, if this was 6 of us, Wayne wouldn't vote 1 month. Sorry. And then the next month I wouldn't vote, but he would be in. So there's people that we still have 5. We still could have a majority, but if someone's gone, then that alternate would then be able to fill that role. And so there's 6 people consistently attending, but that we only have 5 members voting. So that kind of gives us some leeway there. I agree with the training. I am intrigued about the at-large seats. It's interesting, though, that our city council, we're all at large, but we would then restrict the planning commission. So I almost feel like those 2 should be the same instead of having specific to planning commission. No, you need to be from this geographical area. I almost feel like it needs to match city council. As far as the chair goes, I like the vice chair to chair. If we have someone great, then that's great. If we have someone crappy, like Wayne said, maybe not a code thing, maybe just a policy. Did I touch on all of them?
You have.
Terms. How long?
Terms is 2. right?
Terms, yeah, 2 terms,
So
Did you
5
say-
member,
How long?
I'm
4 to
sorry.
6,
3-year, 2 terms.
3 years.
3-year
Mhm.
terms. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Angie.
Mhm.
Who wants to go next?
I can. You know, on the length of term, I've been torn. I've gone back and forth. I've heard different arguments going both ways from every council member and public, and I think most council members have changed their opinion in the last couple of weeks too. I mean, it's gone back and forth. And I know we shouldn't compare it to the size of the city, but I feel like our city, I've always felt like 5 is the proper number. It just, when you go to them, I feel like 7 will start to get convoluted. It may give people more chance, but I think reducing our terms to 3 gives more chance. So I'm leaning towards 5 with 3-year terms, 2 consecutive terms, and there needs to be at least a minimum of a year gap between. And I think the planning commission should be left in charge of the chair and vice chair. But I would encourage that it be limited to 2 years.
What's your position on alternates?
I do not like the idea of alternates.
Thank you.
I think I would almost feel like that's a slap in the face to somebody. I think anybody's capable to do it.
I agree. I need to clarify that. My suggestion for an
no,
alternate
I
was
agree.
not like a sit here and wait, and then one day.
No. I didn't
vote.
mean, I meant the other type of alternates. I think I don't even know if we saw that in any of the examples.
It came
but-
right here.
It's pretty good. And I do like that idea. I mean, it gives more people the opportunity. I don't know how you'd feel as a planning commissioner that.
So I just have a question on your idea, Angie. Would that alternate only need to step out if there was not a majority? I mean, if it's all a majority, are they still able to vote, or do they just not vote for that month, period?
So you would only need to have 5 votes. So it would be uneven. Case of a tie, right?
So
If
I'm saying,
someone's missing the meeting, they would step in to fill.
They
the
wouldn't
5.
be an alternate on that month or on
Right.
that meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
So the term alternate just means,
Or a non-voting member.
right, for 1
Big
month.
month.
Then they can just alternate who votes.
Mhm.
Would they still sit up here and make comments?
Yeah,
They could still participate, they just wouldn't vote.
yeah. And if you hate it, that's fine. I just thought
Well, I
it's
didn't-
good to give us.
I didn't like
something-
the idea of having a trial or whatever we wanted to call that last week. I did not like that idea.
Me neither.
Okay. Thank you, Blair.
can I just make, sorry, 2 points I forgot to mention. The at-large, I agree with Angie. I think if our election is at-large, our planning commission, I do think that it could be recommended for the mayor to select to take that into consideration, encouraged, but I think that would be hard to require, might be difficult. And kind of on the same note, but maybe a little bit off, I think the PR committee could do a better job of getting planning commission openings out, helping them understand what the planning commission does, what it involves, a little bit more detail, because I think people aren't necessarily opposed to going for it. They just don't really know what it is. So I think we could do a little bit better job informing the public of that as well. Just, sorry, last 2 thoughts.
Thank you. Councilman Soderquist.
So my thoughts have gone all over the place as well. I agree completely, though, that we need the bylaws. We need some guidance so that it's all clear, and the training needs to be there. As I looked at it, I tried to look at every decision. If we made the decision to go 7-3 tonight, guess what? We need 5 positions. We got 5 openings. How are we going to roll out 5? We'll have to figure that out. We can't do them all now with 3-year terms, because then in 5 years they'll all be off. So that's one of the hurdles of going to 7, unless we decide we'll go to 7, but we'll make it 6 this year and 7 next year, or whatever it is, so that you can, not have everybody going off at the same time. But I like getting more people involved and included. We definitely need that. All of the training and all the documentation that I've found about planning commissions say you should not pick people to specifically represent certain areas. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cherry, but that's what I read in the League of Towns and City.
Yeah, I believe that's the case.
But they do like representation throughout, and they also like
Right.
representation from various backgrounds. They don't have to be, all planners or all
Right.
people
And-
that,
Yeah, and when I made the suggestion to have representation from across the city, I apologize if that came across like I was saying it needed to be split up in districts. It was more to what Councilmember Albert said, just something for the mayor to take into consideration.
right.
Just making sure it's not everybody from the east side or the west side or something like
Correct.
that.
Yeah, so I agree with that. And as far as the terms, again, looking at our current makeup, if we go to 7, we will have 5 brand new, 1 year, and 1 with more than a year. So we definitely need to make sure we have lots of training and somebody that's making sure that we don't get a persuasive group or individual coming in and getting the quorum vote that goes against the code. And I'm not sure whose job that's going to be to make sure that doesn't occur. Is that you,
That
Sherry?
would be me and Jamie.
Okay.
We're really good at telling people what they can and cannot.
So that would be good as well. So from my standpoint, I can do the 5 members, 3 years. I can do the 7 members, 3 years. I think the 7 members though would be difficult to roll out immediately. Maybe not. Maybe we got 5 people waiting in the wings that want to come in and be on this planning commission. The other question I have is if we go to 7 and we have a hard time finding people to fill it, do we then revisit? Do we beg? What do we do? No?
We go recruit.
We recruit, yeah. I do agree with the comments about, the quorum. If you have 7, you have to have a minimum of 4 votes, no matter how many people show up. If 2 are gone, it's not a majority of whoever's there. It should be the quorum of what the entire makeup is. Or if 5 are there, then you have to have 3. Even if 3 show up, all 3 have to, I agree with that. The alternates, I don't like the concept of the alternates we talked about last time where somebody's just sitting there not really functioning, but just being, learning. Let's see, what else do we have? So as far as, seniority or not seniority, but maturity on the planning commission, again, if Sherry and Jamie are taking control of it, that's okay. If not, I didn't see it anywhere, but is there an option to have a couple terms be longer than others so that you do get consistency? That was one of the comments that came from one of the cities was if you have information that goes over, some of these developments go over 3 years. If nobody on the commission is even aware of what took place, then you lose some continuity. So is there any value in having some maybe 5 years, some maybe 3 year? If we did that, then we wouldn't have to fill in 5 brand new, well, actually, I guess the ones that are serving right now would still have 5 years, right? And the people taking the place of the current open would be a 5-year one.
Yeah, they would finish out what they were originally appointed for. It would be the new members that came in that fall under the 3-year.
Yeah, so of the 3 open positions right now, 2 of them are simply filling out the remainder of a 5-year term. So there's only one that's starting new. So whatever decision is made as far as term length would apply to that new appointment and moving forward.
Really quickly, can you just tell us how long those terms are while we have this discussion?
One is a 2-year term, one is a 3-year term.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Rob had 2 years left. Tim had 3 years left.
So Quinn, just to go with your discussion.
Yep.
My brain wouldn't allow me to, so I actually sat down and looked at a 5 and 3 and a 7 and 3
Good job.
and partial terms. And yeah, you'd have maybe 5 new faces this year. You'd have 1 new face next year. You'd have 2 new faces the year after that. And then it would go 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2. So it'd take a few years, but the first ones would have to be staggered like you're saying.
Right.
But yeah, you could do it so you're not replacing 5 every 3 years. It can be done so it balances out, but there is a sequence of turnover.
Okay. So as far as the term, also looking at the smaller cities, 6 of the 11 that, are the size of what South Weber would be projected to build out to, have 4-year terms. I know that's not in our consideration here. I don't know why they have 4 instead of 3 or 5, but that was interesting. So I bounced around. I'll go through 3 or 5 years. I agree with comments that if you're going to have 7 members, you need to do 3, because I don't think we're going to get 7 with 5-year commitments. So I can go with 3 if we're going 7. If we have 5, I can go 3 or 5. The 5 or 7 members, again, I think 5 members is sufficient. 7 members, there's some pros and cons to it. I can support if that's where everybody wants to go, but my preference would be 5. I already said no alternates. The terms, again, would be based off of the number of years. If you do 3 years, I'm fine somebody serving 3, but maybe not consecutive. So maybe you do put it 2 terms. And the chair, vice chair, I agree with trying to rotate that. The 1 year or 2 year, if you put it in writing that it's 1 year and you just don't have somebody that's ready to step up, I guess it's just hard to plan or think through every single scenario. And I don't want to tie something down that we suddenly, get less than ideal because we put too much constraint in our code. Anyway, those are the thoughts I have at this point.
Okay. So it looks like we are in agreement for 3-year terms. It looks like almost everyone agreed that 3-year terms was sufficient, or a rotation of 3 and 5.
That would be confusing to work out.
It would.
Wayne can go scratch on that a little bit more.
It would probably muddy the water, be harder to regulate. 2 terms, it seemed like everybody was in agreement with that. No alternates, except Angie recommended or is considering a 5-member commission with actually 6-member commission, but 5 vote. And so they rotate around. Would the council be open to that idea? Then you could always be sure to have a full group, well, at least close to a full commission each month, which...
Mayor, may I share a couple thoughts on that idea of the
Sure.
rotating non-voting member? The first thought is, if a developer is paying attention and is watching that rotation, they potentially could request to come forward on a meeting when they think they will have favorable votes. The other thought is, and it's the same, I think, with any type of alternate, of how engaging is that when you're not voting that month? Would you decide to take the day off if you heard that the other 5 were going to be there, or whatnot? Those were just the 2 thoughts that I had. Maybe the first one more important than the other, of potentially stacking the votes and aligning that if a developer was paying attention that way.
Can I ask how we feel about having the liaison? If there's only 4 in attendance, 4-member quorum, having the liaison cast in the
I get
in the event of...
Let's ask Blair what he thinks about that.
I was actually sitting here thinking, well, what if we compromised and said 6 members and the liaison broke the ties?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Can I speak to that for a second? It's highly recommended by the League of Cities and Towns that a council member not vote. Part of the reason is because, and Jamie can speak to it more if he wants to, or David, but part of the reason is because the planning commission needs to be a little bit detached just in terms of their roles and responsibilities from the council. And I don't know if detached is the right word, but because they're supposed to be a recommending body, putting a council member as a liaison or in any way connecting a vote of a council member to the planning commission puts undue influence by the council on the commission's decisions. And it removes the level of objectivity that the planning commission needs to have because they're
And one other comment on that is, just from experience, you feel like you are, the minute you speak as the liaison, that they are taking that as representation. And and if you've noticed, I mean, I've tried not to speak in most of the planning commissions, and that's because the developers, and even I think it feels like, and Taylor can speak to this, I think some of the developers think I'm overriding whatever they're saying. And so I think it's a little bit, it makes you almost in an uncomfortable position. So, I mean, I said that in one hand, but then I thought about it. I didn't like to speak in it. I started off when we first started the liaison to speak, but it kind of muddied the water for the commission, I believe.
Yeah, I would agree there. I strongly recommend against having the council member be a tie-breaking vote or having any vote with the planning commission. When you look at defending decisions of the city in general, it's important that the planning commission play its recommending role and that the council play its legislative role in approving things. And the planning commission's decisions most often are administrative. The councils are legislative. And when you start having a council member vote in the planning commission meetings, then it's arguable that some of those decisions may pass into the legislative category. And there can be ramifications for that if you have citizens who are opposed to a decision and want to challenge that decision, or developers.
Yes.
I think the history of the city might play a little bit of a role here as well. It's longer than my tenure, but at one point the role was kind of reversed, where a member of the planning commission was the liaison that came to city council meetings and provided an update of what took place. I think to Haley's point, as far as communication, there was a goal at one point to try to help that communication. And we tried it with the planning commissioner coming to council. What I've heard anecdotally is that the planning commissioners didn't necessarily know what that role was per se. Very clearly, they would come to council meeting, but you got maybe a one-person story that was supposed to represent the whole commission and what took place, but it didn't happen that way. So we switched that, and now, it goes the opposite direction, where a council member goes and attends, which, has some pitfalls as was described. My perspective on that is that as we draft bylaws and we define those roles, it might be easier to go back to the idea of a planning commissioner reports to the council. It was brought up the idea of the commissioner, or not the commissioner, the chair, or maybe the vice chair. If the chair's role is to organize the meetings and make sure agendas are in line, that the vice chair is the one who comes to council meetings and reports, or some other communication structure. To me, that's more of a function of kind of policy and procedure than it was a true issue with the structure. And so I bring that up as maybe there are other ways to hit that communication goal. And the communication in some ways is a little bit of a tricky subject, because there needs to be an awareness of what each body does, and there needs to be a coordination, but they are separate and distinct bodies, as Jamie brings out, with very defined and different roles in the process of development. And so I think we could bridge that in some way with some more clearly defined roles and processes for communication. And one of the ideas that I've heard through some of the discussions, Haley brought up a really good idea one time about the planning commission will interact with the code so directly. And there are times, and I think Taylor's brought this up before as well, that there are times where the planning commission runs into a challenge of interpreting code or applying code and gets kind of frustrated. Man, I wish the code wasn't like this. Well, it's not their job to change code, but there hasn't been a communication process to hand that off to the council and say, we ran into this snag. Council, could you adjust code? Could you legislate for us and fix that moving forward so that we don't run into it? I think that's kind of the gap in the bridge we're trying to figure out. So long explanation for a simple idea of maybe there's a process there rather than a code solution.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say ladies first, but
Go ahead.
I just want to give one last plug in with regards to 7 versus 5. Personal experience, when I was appointed to sit on the planning commission back in 2014, there were times where I felt subjects were coming up that I had no clue. I had no clue as to what this meant to the city, how I was going to proceed, and I felt that there were several others on the council that were somewhat in the dark, and we weren't getting clear direction. And I could see in that event, 5, you could have one voice that can dominate the whole discussion. And I don't say dominate in a negative way, but basically could steer the conversation without looking at all aspects. Where you have multiple and you have those tenures that are in time switching off, I think you have multiple voices that could soften that. It could help with the discussion and giving a more holistic perspective versus the 5. And if you have all 5 there, just another plug for the 7 versus 5.
We're just kind of on the same page. I was just going to say, given the information that staff just relayed to us, considering the alternates, I really feel strongly that we need to have 4 as a quorum, and I don't really like the other options we have as for alternates. So I feel that we need to go with 7. Addressing Quinn's concern as to how do we build that up. I'm not the math genius, so you may have to check me on this, but if we do the 1-2-1-2-1 that I was talking about with terms, if we have a 5, so we have 3 open spots. If we filled our 5 now, and then we got 2 more, if we had just one of those serve a 4-year or 2-year term, one of those just that first time, it would put us right on rotation with that 1-2-1-2-1. So what we could do is, if we are able to build up to 7, just one of those newer members would either take a 2-year or 4-year term just to get us on schedule, and then we would be on schedule from that point out.
Yeah, it would work with either a 5-member or a 7-member. One of the 2 or one of the 2 new positions would take a 2-year term. The other would take a 3-year term and stagger those 2, and you can get back. But it's for a 7-member, it's a 2-3, 2-2-3. 5-member, it's like you say, it's a 1-2-1-2.
Yeah.
Okay, so we
Nick,
have.
What's your opinion?
Okay, I'll tell you that.
Well, I mean, I think like,
No, I would like to weigh in on that as well. Being the person that's gone through interviews and it's been an arduous task, and overwhelming to think that I need to find 2 more to serve. I mean, in the future, it wouldn't be as big a deal. This year, it seems like a lot to me. I do feel kind of like Blair does that 7 members, well, and Angie, like they would take a long time to weigh in on every single issue. I think it's a lot of opinions all over the board. I think 5 members would be my preference, especially this year. So that's my opinion. I don't mind the 3 years and the 2 terms, and I don't mind not having alternates. But that is my concern with a 7-member commission, sorry.
Mayor, may I ask you just a question? So if you wanted to do the 5-year and no alternates, would you do a 3 quorum then?
Well, I do like this is something new that I hadn't heard of before, of having 4-member quorum.
but you can still do a 4-member quorum with a 5.
You can.
I mean, I can't remember the last planning commission that 2 were missing. I mean, there's been a couple that I can think of, and one was mentioned earlier today.
The lofts.
So, but
The RV
Most of the
park
time when
showed-
there's been two members, the meeting's been, or two missing, they've canceled and postponed the meeting that I have paid attention. I would, not to step on you, I would encourage a 4-member quorum, even if we stayed with a 5-member council or 5-member commission.
What do we do for a tiebreaker if needed then?
Does the city planner vote?
It tables.
Can I
until the
ask
next planning
just a
commission.
clarifying question of what you mean by a 4-member quorum?
I was actually going to ask
A
you.
quorum typically would mean
The majority.
the number of people you'd need to vote, but I'm hearing it used two ways, which would be the number of people needed to hold a meeting and conduct a vote, and that for the body to recommend any action or take any action, that it would require
So
supermajority.
Well,
Or
another way to say that is you require a 2/3 majority vote. 5 is 4. It's 3.6 something, but
Yeah.
you have to round it up to 4. That's another way of saying it. You have to have 2/3 majority. So
Okay.
that means you have to have 4 people there to pass any motion, or it doesn't pass.
You'd have to have 4 and they'd all have to be in
positive.
agreement.
Yes, that's what that would mean.
well, and that's what I was going to ask Jamie is when I was stumbling on this, it was 4 for an open meeting. 4 would made a quorum, and I always thought that 3 was just state law. But there was several in there where they said 4 make the quorum. 4 have to be in attendance for an open and public meeting.
Is
I
that
wasn't
when it
sure.
was a 5-member or when it was a 7-member?
I believe those were almost all 7 members.
Yeah, so it's very standard to have a quorum be a majority. And for a council of 5, a quorum is 3. And if only 3 people are in attendance, you would need all 3 to vote one way or the other to have that pass or fail. Really just pass. I shouldn't say fail.
The one exception.
And so if you have 7, then you're saying that 4 is now the majority, and you'd have to have 4 to hold a meeting, and you'd have to have 4 votes to pass. So Jamie is absolutely right. Typically, you're saying quorum, and it means 2 things, but we're talking quorum, and it sounds like we're trying to separate that and say, let's have 5 members, but still require 4 as the number for a.
I mean, that, yeah, some are saying 7, some are saying 5, but yeah, that we're saying.
No,
4.
your clarification was helpful to me. What you're trying to avoid is a situation where you have fewer than the full body available to meet, and then a passing vote becomes 2 because you only have 3 members present. Or
Yes.
in the case of a 7-member quorum that you have, or a 7-member body that you have 4 present and only 2 or 3 could pass something. So you'd require a majority of the body to pass or recommend any action.
And that's how it is. That's our current standard, that if 3 people are in attendance, it requires all 3 votes, a quorum, to vote yay for it to pass.
All we were saying is can you change that to 4?
And yes, you can do that.
Yeah.
We're just saying the more voices at the table, the better.
So then
So
you don't.
if
just have-
4 are required for an open public meeting, then that just gives a little bit more diversity to whatever's being discussed.
Yeah, ultimately, as Wayne is pointing out in the terms that he used, is that you're simply saying a quorum is now 4 instead of 3. And in any instance, whether you have 5 people there or have 4 people there, you're still requiring 4 votes for it to be recommended or to pass. So you're changing, just to clarify, right? I just want to state it as clearly as I can.
Well,
Yeah, if that were the way to go, you're essentially saying that it's no longer a simple majority, 3 out of 5 to pass something. You would be requiring 4 out of 5 to pass something in all cases.
4 positives, 4 yays to
4 yeas
1.
to pass. 4 yeas to pass or to recommend.
We don't
and-
have that here though.
Reasonable?
And who,
Yeah, we don't.
Right, yeah.
yeah, and who
Oh,
is a tiebreaker? What if,
There wouldn't be you
There
couldn't
wouldn't
have a
be, 'cause
tiebreaker
you'd have to
because
have
you wouldn't,
4.
you have to have 4 positive votes or 4 negative votes.
That sounds.
that seems really difficult.
with 5-member, yeah. That's why I like the 7-member.
That's why I
'cause
say
it's
don't
like,
do 7, let's just leave it.
well, I will just bring up some past things where we had 3 people and that just really shot us in the foot.
I mean, my own recommendation would be against requiring 4 votes if it's a 5-member body, but I would favor the notion of not allowing folks on the planning commission to cherry pick meetings when people are out of town simply because a majority would carry. So the idea of requiring 3 votes in all circumstances makes good sense.
So could we require 4 commissioners to be in attendance at a meeting? Otherwise, the meeting will not be held, but then a majority vote would be 3 yes votes.
Yes, you could do that.
That's what I think would make more sense
For a 5
for a
member.
5-member commission.
Yeah.
To require 4 to always be there.
Yeah.
To hold the meeting.
To hold the
Or
meeting.
for an open
4
meeting,
need to be in
3.
attendance.
Okay.
And with today's technology, it should be doable.
Yeah,
Even
that's
if
not
people
very
are
hard
traveling.
anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, they need to understand that when they sign up, that there are 12 meetings throughout the year, and this is the week that they occur, and this is the date they occur, and
But
Is
again, we're
that-
gonna talk
Around it.
policy, we're not gonna put that in code. That's part of the policy.
That will be part of their bylaws and
right.
Right.
Yeah, but that makes a
We-
difference as to what we put here.
It does.
I will point out that we do have in our city code right now, one provision about 75% attendance. Otherwise, it's an automatic removal from the commission. That doesn't necessarily affect this, but it is in there.
Okay. So is the council amenable to a 5-member commission? 4 must be in attendance to hold a meeting, but a majority vote of 3. 3-year terms with the possibility of serving for 2 terms with no alternates.
I am.
I am.
So do we have 5 now, and then maybe next year or the following year, bump it up to 7?
I think
I-
whatever we do tonight just stays.
Well, yeah. I'm just saying, I there's the value in 7. I just don't know that we have 5 candidates. Maybe they're all waiting outside the door. But that's why I'd lean to 5 right now, because we're going to get 3 new people, supposedly.
Well, the code change is what was under discussion today, but what I'm hearing you say is, do we make the code change of 7 tonight, but we give ourselves 2 years to fill a full
Ramp
council?
into it.
You can still operate with 5 if you still have to have 4 in a presence and 3 to make a vote, but you got 2 years to build it up to 7. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's the other
Yeah.
option.
Is that a
Otherwise,
possibility?
Yes, if you said that 7 is a full commission and you only had 5 members currently, that's more than a quorum. You could hold meetings and you could vote.
Yes.
And 4 would be a quorum.
Yes.
Just standard practice of, the majority of 7 would be 4, and it would require 4 yeses to approve or recommend.
And it would get them back to functioning. I will agree with that.
Yeah, there's not a code requirement that you have to have a full commission to operate, if that makes sense. There is a requirement to have a quorum to operate. And if you have 7 as a full body, then a quorum by definition is 4. You could request that to be different, but my recommendation would be, if you want to have 7 as the ultimate goal, there's not a timeline by code to get to 7, right? We've seen that even if we had 5, we've got a couple that have resigned. If we had 3, that would still be considered a functioning planning commission until those seats were filled. So saying 7 and only having 5 that are willing to serve right now, you could still function. Based on comments tonight, Corinne said that there were people that expressed interest. We could open that up, and Haley said planning PR committee could try to help spread the word. We could see if there's additional interest there, and try to fill that if that's desired. but the planning commission could function at 4 or 5 members.
I just want to just make one more plea. Or not plea, one more comment that there have been several meetings in the 3 years that I've been here that we have had meetings to nobody. And I know that's changed now. And I know we have a lot of public input right now, but I have a hard time seeing South Weber sustaining 7 in perpetuity. I really, really do. So I don't want us to get to the situation where we say, okay, we have 7, we have 3 years, we do 2-year terms, and then we have in 5 years when these terms are up, then our hands are tied and we don't have anybody to fill these because we've set term limits and we have 7 people that we have to fill it. So that's honestly my biggest concern.
I think it's.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I think it's a valid concern for sure. It's the same concern I have. And I think when you're in the position of what if, you look at the stats. And that's exactly what I did. And like I said, 15 cities here. Some of these codes are 30 years old. Ephraim, Manti, I mean, small cities with 7-member commissions for 20 plus years that have been able to be sustainable. I feel like if they can do it and they have been doing it, there's a really good chance we can too.
So to that though, let me ask you this. How are they filling them? And do they have a political climate? Are people being, is the mayor having to go out and petition people? Are they having people knock on the door? Or is it a mayor begging someone saying, please, I need 2 people this year and I don't have anybody doing it?
The code
We
didn't
don't know.
specify,
There's no data for that.
but
So
they
that's
have
what I'm
their
saying. Like,
yeah.
we can't judge this based on for the last 30 years. That's been working for these cities. We have no idea how they've been filling it.
Yeah, to answer your question, it just said that it was the same situation as ours, chosen by the mayor, approved by the council.
I know a lot of them didn't have term limits,
Yep, that's the key.
and that's a key. I mean,
I feel like a lot of them did.
and there's 20 that don't
Yeah.
out of the 30 some.
I have a lot of different cities on that
So,
but
but
list, but
the only reason I say that is I've appeared before some of them. Some of them have been on there for 20 years. And good or bad, whether that's the right thing, wrong thing. I'm just saying that is, I think, how some of those are getting filled. I mean, go to Angie's hometown and yours, I believe. The Marriotts and the Slaters have been on those planning commissions forever.
I'm
and
not
that-
incorporated, but okay.
So the big
We're
towns.
incorporated.
Oh,
Angie, if I may, just to
Yes.
respond to your question. Go to a 7-member council doesn't mean you have to have 7 members all the time every year. You can still function with a 5-member council or 4-member council as you're seeking to find those others. You can still function. You can still move forward. So even if you are having a dearth of resources who don't want to apply at that given time, you're still going to have your 5-member council. You're still going to have to find 5 people to replace 5, but 7 just gives you those extra voices in the meantime. Yes, there might be a time where you can't fill 7, but you can still function with 5.
Yeah.
Given the other rules. The idea is you want to fill it out to 7 to maximize the voices being heard, but it doesn't mean if you can't get 5, you got 6, or you can't have 7, but you got 6 or you got 5, you can still move forward. You can still have an operating body. You just miss those 2 voices. You still have to have 4, and you still have to have those 4 vote in a positive to make things more. So I think I understand the concern, but I still think you can get the volunteers. You still move forward. It may not happen all in January like you'd like, but
I just don't see why you would open it up to 7 and say, but we can go with 5. We can make it work with 5 and we'll function with not even a full commission. What's the point of setting 7 if you're okay with 5?
the reason it goes to 7 because you have more voices. You have more voices, you have that more demographic, you have that different perspective to make sure you're covering all angles, all bases of any issue that's coming forward. What I'm saying is if just because you don't have the 7 doesn't mean you have to stop in the water and you can't function. You can still function, but I would prefer to have 7 to have that complete harmony with regards to the community, bringing forth to any decision that's going to affect the growth of the city.
So the other comment would be then if we go 7 to get rid of term limits, because that's the comment from
No.
Santaquin. They said, we used to have term limits, but it was difficult to get people. And when you have a really good person who's willing to serve, they would keep them in. It says when you find a good planning commissioner, you should keep them as long as you can. And so they got rid of their term limits because they were having trouble filling 7. And they have 3-year term limits. Or sorry, 3-year tenure, but no term limits. So that's the other thing is, if you want 7, do you open it up to, maybe 3 terms instead of 2 or something?
One thing that I would point out about the idea of moving to 7, but having to function with fewer if you're still in the process of filling seats, is that by going to 7, you are changing that the quorum is now 4. So if you have 6 or 5 and you're trying to fill, the quorum would still be 4, and it would still require the 4 votes for something to pass. So even if you had 5 for an extended period of time and we're trying to fill those other 2 seats, a quorum would still be 4 because you've defined the planning commission as 7 members.
Taylor, can I ask you a question? How often do you have 4 of the 5 members vote together? In a majority.
In summer months, it seems like it's every other meeting. But most of the time we'll have full commission.
And they, like on one particular issue, they typically vote together, or is it usually like a 2-3 split?
That's interesting. No, I'm only speaking from my perspective. It may be different with other commissioners, but.
Can I request you speak into a microphone?
State
Thanks,
your name
Taylor.
and address.
Oh,
My
yeah.
address. So generally, as the conversation evolves during an agenda item, if there's my perception that things aren't gonna go in the direction that I feel like they're gonna go, I mean, it makes no sense to be a dissenting vote unless I want to make a statement about it. So typically, I'll get a flavor of the direction that the planning commission is going and vote in that same vein, if that makes sense, if that answers the question. I can't even think of an instance where we had a 2-3 vote.
It's usually been one dissenting vote,
Yep.
if there's been any
If there's
dissenting
been
vote.
any.
I can only think of like 3 occasions.
Right.
We had
Okay.
a few occasions, and I was on the planning commission where it was a 3-2 or 4-1. But the recommendation that always came back to the city council was it was a, and the comment came back as the city council needs to understand if it was a 4-1 or a 3-2 and what out. So that was something we've always asked that the planning commission provide is that
Agreed.
background. But primarily it's been 5-0, 4-1.
I think we typically see that in a lot of bodies, right? Even city council tends to do that. A majority of items, you tend to, vote 5-0. Every once in a while, there's 4-1 or 3-2. And it's not typical to see a divided council or commission regularly.
All right, thank you, Taylor.
That may be something to consider putting into the bylaws, that the report out from the planning commission include the vote tally.
Agreed.
Then you'll
good
get
idea.
a sense for whether it was a unanimous recommendation or simply a majority recommendation.
Okay. So Blair and Quinn, I'd like to know if you feel strongly that it should be 5-member, or if you'd be willing to consider 7.
My thoughts are we make it 5-3 now and expand it, next year or the following year if we feel that there's still a need. We're going to get new faces in, and that seemed to be the big push for this discussion when it all started. So
Okay. Blair?
I'm still in favor of 5. It's not going to be the end all be all if it goes to 7. I mean, it does just give more voices. I am concerned about the logistics of it. If we go to 7, I would actually recommend that it be spread out intentionally to get the terms on track and not done just because I think we need to get the 3 members on, and I think we need to get the planning commission functioning the way it should be and get back rolling with it, and then deal with adding the other 2 members as whoever's the mayor at the time, I mean, however, if it's a year from now or however we want to stagger that, but I think it needs to be an intentional staggering, not just as we get somebody.
So just a clarification, are we looking at 2 code changes? One now that talks about 2 3-year terms, two max terms, but a 5 council, and then a year from now, we're doing a code change again to change it to 7.
No, you would be changing it now,
We change it all now, but the plan is that we take.
that you
2 or 3
stagger
years.
that out. That you take 2 years to get there, or whatever we want to say.
Yeah, I want to clarify that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I'm not against 7. I just think jumping to 7 right now makes it hard because if we make 7 now, then they can't function until we get at least 4 on them.
I just want to ask the question, and where would the 7th person sit?
Hey, we got those extra mics, remember?
I've been thinking that the whole time.
Well,
So
but I don't want to be the person down there. No way. Are you kidding me? I would never feel like my voice was as important.
Then we
I
don't use a dais, we have to sit out there on tables.
Yeah, I think we could put them at staff's table. We have all those extra mics right below us. I think that's something that we could figure out. But yes, it is something to consider for sure.
What you suggesting, we need to make a new city hall so you can make a bigger dais?
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
Angie did say she wants to update this dais. She says it needs to be updated. So
have
there's
2
that
chairs,
option too.
But we'll put the junior members in the lower chair.
No. All right. I would greatly appreciate it if we just stuck with 5 for a while. The chance that we could have 3, 4, 5 new members to the commission and 2 that have been there, that just doesn't seem right now. I mean, I think we need to ease into it if we're going to do a 7-member.
I agree.
So, how do we do this? We're not voting on this really, are we, or are we?
I think it's a discussion tonight.
Yeah, this is a discussion item. The hope is that we will be able to have some sense, and I think we have some sense for a majority of the questions. But the idea is that in our next council meeting on the 23rd, actual code language will come forward to make a vote on the code language. So we would like a general,
Need a straw poll.
a little bit of a straw poll there so we know whether to put 7 or 5 in there.
Okay, yeah, so I'm not sure how, because I know,
Oh, let me clarify. Ultimately, we could put either number in the document, and then the night of, you can make the decision and say make it 5 or make it 7. That it will just be numbers at that point, and it would be an easy change. So if the council is uncomfortable putting a number in tonight and telling staff what to do, we're happy to put a number out there that you can then work off of in that meeting.
let's do that, and then we have a couple weeks to deliberate and decide for sure. There's really only one place that we differ in our opinions, so.
I guess I didn't hear that. I heard I heard a majority say that they're good with 7 if you gave a couple of years in which to fill it. I heard one voice who's pretty much, no, I want 5.
I still prefer 5.
Yeah, there's still a preference, majority of 5. So I'm not
I
sure.
heard it differently, so, okay.
Mayor,
I heard a majority of 5.
what I understand the consensus to be, and maybe Jamie can read out his bullet points that he's got, but it seems like the majority, 5 members, 3 years, 2 terms, and then possibly debate or possibly include an option to revisit maybe at the end of this year to see if the council feels like we could or should expand to 7.
Let's go with that, and then we can deliberate over the next 2 weeks and come back and determine for sure. what we've decided.
We could at least use that as a starting point for the ordinance when we write it, when it gets written up.
Yep. Okay.
Can we, if we haven't already given an assignment to start working on the bylaws, who's going to put that together? Are we going to pull it from other cities? Or
We have a couple of examples already, and staff is working to craft that. The general consensus that I heard was the planning commission should be the one that establishes their bylaws. So whether or not that comes forward in March, or we give them a chance to get their feet wet and get started in March and have that be an April agenda item, it might be worth letting them come and attend a meeting and go through that process first before they have to determine exactly what that is. But staff will draft something, and we will help the planning commission get bylaws established.
thank you.
All right.
Can I just ask one more thing? Just for clarification, because Wayne says he hears 7 majority, I hear 5 majority. And not that we're voting tonight, but it would almost be better for staff not to waste their time too if we have a code drafted up.
I think we're 2-2, and Quinn, are
Quinn
you,
is the
Quinn,
swing
are you,
vote.
are you kind
As
of,
I said before, I prefer 5, but I can support 7.
okay.
So let's just go through it. 5.
7.
5.
5.
7.
Okay.
I can weigh in on this too, right?
Yes, you can.
5.
The document will say 5, and the decision will be made in a couple weeks.
Can I make a request that we make this a vote? Somehow we make this code pass next planning commission appointments made.
Yes.
and
Yes,
thereafter
definitely.
Yeah,
functioning.
that's
So there are wheels in motion, I will say. I don't mean to overstep any bounds or tell anybody what to do, but there are wheels in motion, of course, to get the code written. There was a plan and a discussion already that we wanted to get the code done first, so that any appointment would, this code change would apply. Of course, of the 3 positions that we are working toward, one of them is according to this code. The other 2 are filling the remainder of resigned terms. And so the goal is to bring this back in 2 weeks and be able to make that decision. The intention is to have the process of selection from the mayor done by that point, and after the code is updated to hopefully either the 23rd or the next meeting have appointments on the agenda, so that appointments could be made, so that we would have a functioning planning commission by March. There are projects in the hopper that are looking to be available for March, and we would like to have a planning commission available to do that. Of course, if we don't have a planning commission, then that would have to be delayed necessarily, but that's the hope, and wheels are in motion to make that happen. So.
And there's a plan after the appointments to have an orientation for the new members of that commission. or
Yeah, so
Whole commission.
yes, thank you. The 3 of us have been working fairly hard, actually, to gather the training and to make sure that there's materials there. Of course, we don't want to get the cart before the horse and get anybody planning on a training meeting until there's appointments made. And so the goal is to have code done, appointments made, training and orientation take place prior to a March meeting. So it's a short window, it's a small window, but that is our goal. Those are the dominoes in order that we're trying to align and hopefully get a commission that's ready to go and willing and trained and ready for March.
Can we do that with just one more meeting this month, or do we need to call a special meeting of the council so that they can facilitate? I'm with that. If that helps staff in order to make that process, I think it's imperative that we get a planning commission up and rolling. So we have a March meeting, so we don't have any negative impacts with those who want to make changes and or seek the planning commission's advice.
With the notice requirements for an ordinance, and with this not being an emergency ordinance, the earliest it could occur would be in 2 weeks. So we'll have the language drafted in short order. I've already got a draft. I'll just plug in these details, and then we'll get it noticed, and then your regular meeting in 2 weeks is the earliest possible time that you could.
So I guess the question
adopt
would be,
this.
can the mayor then put on the agenda the appointments at that same meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Plan.
We'll
Okay.
write into the ordinance that it will take effect immediately, and then as long as that's agended and voted prior to
Prior.
those appointments, then those appointments will be effective.
All right, thank you.
I was not as clear as Jamie was.
Okay. Next item is legislative review. So bear with me. I go through these as quickly as I can. The first one I want to talk about is SB 61 by Senator Sandel. It prohibits cities from enacting or enforcing an ordinance that prevents conforming and non-conforming signs from upgrading to an electronic changeable sign and sets very narrow criteria for a city to adopt a curfew on an electronic sign. And we've talked about this before, but an update on that. The ULCT is pushing for new language on curfews. Sandel argues that there are greater dimming capabilities now with technology that will allow signs to stay lit all night. ULCT is not of the same opinion. Sandel also will not budge on the size and height of signs. The ULCT is waiting for new language on this bill and currently opposes this bill. It's out of committee. It hasn't, I don't believe it's hit the floor yet.
On calendar.
Dave, do you, or Wayne?
It's calendared.
It's calendared? Okay. Okay, and then SB 144, Billboard Restriction Amendments, sponsored by Senator Hinkins. This is a bill that the billboard industry is pushing and is possibly even more invasive than SB 61. The city cannot prevent the owner of a billboard from building or maintaining a billboard by incentivizing, compensating, or encouraging a developer to discontinue a billboard owner's rights to erect and maintain a billboard. The city, with this bill, cannot restrict land purchasers' ability to place a billboard on real property. They also cannot require a billboard owner to get a permit for maintenance or replace a digital or static face. They cannot prevent a billboard owner from rebuilding a damaged billboard, etc. Those are just a few of the items on that bill.
Can you tell me that number one more time?
144,
Senate or House?
Senate.
Senator Hinkins?
Hinkins, yeah. ULCT contends that this is a property rights issue. The owner should be able to change use of a billboard lease if they wish to negotiate with the city. It ties the hands of cities when negotiating with billboard companies on land use issues, and the ULCT opposes this bill. And then, as stated before in our other meetings, affordable housing is a top priority of legislators this year. And with that, I will talk about HB 98 with Representative Ray. This is the bill that developers can opt out of inspections and plan reviews and engage their own licensed building inspector. It prohibits cities from requiring almost all interior and exterior design elements. We're in negotiations, the ULCT, with Representative Ray, and this includes a body of building inspectors, attorneys, ULCT staff, and elected officials. And what they're trying to compromise on, they would like to, regarding the opt-out plan for review and inspection, they would ULCT would like it only to apply to single-family, duplex, or townhouse. They also are looking to try and get building permit must be issued within 14 days of the plan review. And then inspections of building must take place within 3 days after a request, or a builder can hire their own. So I guess the length of time that it takes for the building permit to be issued and inspections, that is the complaint that the legislators have on this. Also, with the design standards, legislators argue they are too expensive. But the ULCT is asking to expand exemptions for FEMA, National Flood Insurance, historic buildings, wildland urban interface, development agreements, planned unit developments, and other types of overlay zones, and pre-1940 neighborhoods. Cities figure they don't need to regulate interior design, but they're asking to regulate exterior design where building application or material is defective, which doesn't seem like enough to me, but there has to be some compromises. So that's that bill, and that's where we're at on that one so far.
Is that still in committee?
That
With
one
these
is still
negotiations?
in committee, I believe.
I don't think it's gotten onto the agenda yet.
No.
No, I think they're still working on substitutes and whatnot before
Yes.
that goes to committee.
Is a substitute for Representative Ray by chance, or? No?
I think not. That would be nice. Okay. And then we got another fun one, HB 82 Representative Ward. This is the accessory dwelling units within the existing footprint of a home in any single-family residential zone. The negotiating team, we have another negotiating team that met with Representative Ward 3 times in the past week. And what the ULCT proposed, they have a counter proposal called ULCT 3. And they're asking for low income or college town communities to be exempt from this bill. Cities could impose a property tax lien to ensure compliance with ADUs. And no short-term rentals ensure that full-time residents occupy ADUs. Also, they could adjust impact fees for added infrastructure, 911 calls, things of that nature. They want to make sure the legislature is aware that there is a gap in the current impact fee code and that ADU amenities would increase the price of homes, which would not help their affordable housing issue. Representative Ward seems to be amenable to 3 of those 4 things, but adjusting impact fees, he is not budging on.
He didn't budge on most of that. It came out of committee, and they didn't take any of ULTC's recommendations. It's a pretty bad deal, Mayor. What we tried to do is a compromise. The committee didn't take it, and they basically kicked it out. They made comments like, even people in the committee said the bill will violate local control. State interest in housing affordability trump the concerns of the local government.
Right.
Basically don't care about the impacts that this is going to have on infrastructure. The city, their quote is, this is the #1 bill for the House majority.
Yes.
This bill 82. The governor's not willing to step in. The Senate has mixed reviews. This is being funded by the lobbyists of the developers and the real estate PAC. So you know who's behind this bill. Ward does not understand capital infrastructure. He doesn't really care. They are all about trying to provide more housing, and that's the impact. So I'm just going to chime in right here. And if anyone's listening to this, you need to write to your senator. I've written to our representative and got no response, but write to your senator, Ann Milner, and hopefully we can stop this on the Senate floor, or at least get some sort of concessions. AUDs in themselves are not necessarily bad, but not being able to have any kind of control or regulations with what's going on is going to hurt the city in more ways than we can talk about tonight.
There are very significant concerns from a city financial perspective and city service level, right? You think about water shares, water rates, all of that, and all of a sudden you have an additional level of population without the financial tools for a city to be able to provide service for that population. And that's just one example. There's a whole host of those types of service concerns, but like Wayne said, ultimately, they're saying that's not our concern, and we want to just make sure that there's additional.
Mayor, can I make a recommendation, at least for the council to consider? Could we invite our representative, Kelly Miles, to come to our next city council meeting remotely and speak to us specifically about this bill and his position on this bill?
We could ask him, during the legislative session, do you think that would be?
Well, I think it's most appropriate. I mean, Representative Ward is right. This bill is meeting with this home city, Bountiful, to do the very same thing. Why shouldn't we ask a representative to come here and
Yeah,
express to him, we have
I
some
know.
significant concerns about this bill. Can you express our citizens to why this is a good thing? We don't see it.
Yeah. I think we can definitely reach out to him and see if that's a possibility. I know that Representative Ward is going to Bountiful's Council this week, I think, to talk about it to them, and that's going to be a wild meeting. So
I don't know how the council feels about that.
Put my name on that request.
Yeah, mine too.
I mean, I think
Mine
the
too.
whole council's name on that request.
Actually throw in $5 that I say he doesn't respond.
Well, and that speaks a lot. It
Let's-
speaks volumes if he doesn't want to respond. But I think as a
Yeah.
council, we need to respond to this body, answer to this people whom he represents in regards to this House bill, and tell us why this is in the best interest. Sorry, I get a little emotional about that one.
yes, let's reach out to him. See if he can come on the 23rd.
You can't come and encourage him to do it by remotely.
Online.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So like Wayne said, this bill is the number one priority in the House. And so ULCT is looking to and plans to fight it more in the Senate. There are a few things that Representative Ward would be willing to look at changing if ULCT changed their position, and that did not include impact fees and costs for the cities. But ULCT did vote to change their position from opposed to neutral on that. They're working to find the best possible outcome, also understanding that certain compromise will allow us to maintain a seat at the table.
Just to clarify that, Mary, the LPC voted for the ULCT to be neutral on ULCT's third substitute, which
Right,
allowed them to what it did is it told the negotiating body an opportunity to they had some room to negotiate with Ward on that bill. It wasn't like we were being neutral towards bill. We're neutral with regards to what we're proposing, and it still let the legislative body, if you wanted to fight politic with your other senators and other bodies, this is how the ULTC was going to represent it forward. That's neutral.
Right.
Doesn't mean we're hands off at all. So,
Right.
clarify.
Yeah.
That was for ULCT3. That's correct. So,
Yeah, the league was definitely not in support, and even their own substitute that they were trying to negotiate and bring forward ideas, we still were neutral on as a league, not even supportive of that. It was
Right.
just simply negotiating, recognizing that in some cases, knowing that there are two legislative bodies there, right, House and Senate, that you may not get very far with one and the wave may crash over you, but there's, by completely opposing and continuing to dig in heels, you lose voice. And so that was the recommendation. Was
My
to,
frustration is they're backing down. They realize they're not going to get anywhere with this, and they're trying to find a compromise ready to stick it, draw the line in the sand, if you will. The House Majority Whip was in there, and he's so frustrated that they're not getting any cooperation out of the city. Well, maybe the message there is you're doing something that you're not listening to the message that the cities are giving you. You're just driving your own message.
yes.
And that's what's causing a divide between the cities, the towns, and our leadership. And if the public doesn't get that right now, then they need to start sending a strong message as to who we're sending up there, because they're not representing the best interests of this community. Yeah, we're only 8,000 here, but I tell you what, this is up and down the state and really along this Wasatch Front, and it's really causing a divide. And the House representatives are not getting it. They think that they're just providing more houses for our children to rent. No, this is for people coming in from all over the state because we have this great economy that's going on. Yes, I understand there's a issue with housing right here, but to make single family dwelling units into multifamily dwelling units and not have the cities be able to manage the expenditures, that's a mess waiting to happen. Sorry.
I believe the Majority Whip is Mike Schultz, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Mike Schultz is a developer.
Problem right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So reach out to your legislators. Okay. That is all I those were the main points. Wayne or Dave, if you have any other.
No, I think I've given my view.
I will point out that there is a much longer list of bills that we're tracking and watching. Those are just the ones that seem to have the largest detrimental impacts that we're trying to work toward.
Yes, thank you. All right, let's move to reports. Is there any new business?
I have one item, and just an item of information. We met Nancy, Mayor, Dave, Terry, Jamie, I think. We all met to discuss the development agreement that we discussed last meeting for the what's the name of that?
South Weber Gateway.
South Weber Gateway, which is on the Paul property at the east end. We're going to bring that back to council for a discussion item to discuss whether or not how we feel about allowing any type of residential on the property before we even get down the road of a development agreement, so that we do not tie the hand, the city's hand, to another development agreement without understanding where we stand.
Yeah, as staff, we've continued to discuss that a little bit more today in a staff meeting, and that will come forward as a discussion item for the entire council to provide some clarification on the general plan designation there on the crosshatches for the commercial highway zone. There's a few properties that we put that designation on, and the hope is to just clarify what that designation truly means. And so staff will put some information together for that, but it really comes down to the crux of whether residential will be allowed on that, but also some additional elements of what that crosshatch really does, and the tools that the council has to have development happen on those pieces of property that we've designated with that. So as a reminder, the crosshatch simply says development agreement and development plan required. And so again, just to clarify what that means. And so staff will help put some stuff together to get that, but a lot of it centers around the question of allowance of residential on that at all, or have it be straight commercial highway zone as it's designated underlying in the general plan. So
We didn't want to waste the time going through the development agreement process, knowing where that development agreement would get. We didn't want to waste everybody's time, and knowing that what was being presented would be rejected.
yeah, the developer is very hesitant to, put a lot of money into really fleshed out plans if, it's dead on arrival. And so we feel as those that met that the council can provide some direction on that and clarify the general plan. This also ties to the conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago in council, where the request was to talk about general plan and provide some direction, generally speaking, to Planning Commission and to city staff as far as the appetite of the council to go outside of the general plan at times if proposals are brought forward or a developer is requesting conversation outside of general plan designation. So we're going to kind of piggyback that a little bit, and we'll list out kind of the bullet points and provide some materials. But if you're thinking through that in your minds in the next couple of weeks, that will help with that conversation.
Anything else, Angie?
Nope, you covered it all.
And it was more that we didn't want to waste the city's time. I
Right.
don't care if we waste the developer's time. I don't want to waste our time.
That's right. Okay. Any other new business? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to council and staff reports. Wasatch Integrated Waste, just an update. Just so you know, they deliver engineered fuel to Devil's Slide at the amount of 200 to 250 tons per week of non-recyclable paper and plastic. And so I think that's pretty cool. They also anticipate that the final cover of the second tier of Phase 5 landfill, the one closest to our area, will be applied by late summer of this year, which is awesome because that means they'll be moving to another cell in their landfill, and it's actually the furthest away from South Weber, the cell furthest away. And so that should really help with smells. So, and there's only one other tier that will be going on after this one, and that will be a few years down the road. We won't have to deal with that for a while. Plus, they're further away now than they've ever been because of the slope of the hill, and so things are really looking up for our city and our noses. So, also, box culvert under US 89, we've run into some hiccups. There's a major gas line that runs right where we want to put the trail and the box culvert. And there also, if we move it further south, there's some gravel pit concerns. And so we've been in meetings with the county and UDOT. The construction of that box culvert has been postponed until 2022 to work out the issues so that we can get this right. We're working on moving the billboard sign that was leveled in the windstorm. You've probably seen it up there laying on the ground. If we can move this to a different location, that would really help with the location of the trail and the box culvert. Reagan Signs is amenable to this prospect and willing to work with us, and this should help alleviate those issues. So that's where we're at on that. Let's see, Councilman Windsor?
The City Code Committee has continued to meet. We're making progress, but unfortunately, we're not getting up at the end with the uses and applying the uses to the different zones. I have not heard back from the Planning Commission if they spent any time on the definitions yet. I don't vision that they've gotten very far if they had. So trudging along.
All right, great, thank you. Councilwoman Petty.
Thank you, Mayor. The Parks and Recreation Committee met to establish a timeline for our Canyon Meadows West project. The RFPs were opened on Friday. We have until the last week of February to accept bids, at which time the committee will evaluate, and we will meet the first week of March to discuss awarding a contract for that.
Great, thank you. Councilman Soderquist.
I don't know if there's going to be any report about our retreat, but we had very good discussion about our financial planning and looking ahead to the future with the budgets and all that information. Hopefully is going to be coming back from the various committees by March so we can prioritize and budget appropriately for the coming year.
All right. And Dave, did you have something?
Yeah,
to
I'll
add?
just add that after the budget retreat and the direction that was given there, budget season is in full swing for staff. And so we've already had some preliminary meetings there in the various departments as we work through that budget process in preparation for those committee meetings in March. So if you haven't responded to the email to indicate the dates and times you're available those first couple of weeks in March for those committee meetings, please do that as soon as you can so that we can get that on the calendar. And there's a lot of schedules to coordinate during that short window to make sure, all the committee meetings happen and we can get through those budget discussions. So following up to what Quinn said there.
All right, thank you. Also, yes, the retreat, I put it in the newsletter, but I just wanted to thank staff and council and everybody for all their hard work with the retreat. It was an awesome retreat, and everyone did a great job, and there were great comments and great ideas brought forth. So thank you, everybody. Councilwoman Alberts.
Yes, the YCC met. We divided them into committees. And so we have a few new things. Some will come to council. We have our new newsletter will be going out. The committee was to pick a resident, and they picked Ray Peak before he had passed away. So when they were able to come back to get a council vote, they brought it to the council, and everybody felt that he was the perfect candidate to start this off on. So we got a hold of his daughters, and he will be our first, what did we end up calling it? Citizen Spotlight?
Yeah, I think that's what we called it.
So they have a cute little template, and they're getting it all together. So you'll see that come forth in March. They also have a logo committee. They've written up and drawn their own logo and have decided which one they're going to go with. And I believe that one will be coming to council for final approval. Did we decide that?
Well, yeah, according to the bylaws, because it has to do with our city logo, we need to have approval for the youth city council. Is that correct, Jamie? Thank you.
Okay, so that should be coming up soon. We have a service committee. They are working on something every month, and this month for February, they wanted to do something for Peterson Farms. They wanted to deliver them cards, and then they decided to get the elementaries both involved. So they're working on that, and we'll deliver some 30 to 40 cards for each resident at Peterson Farms. And we have a funding committee who will be working with local business owners to see if they would be willing to sponsor them. So we have some members working on that. So lots of really fun, exciting things happening with the YCC.
That's great. Do you have a mascot?
It's you, Joe.
No, we don't have a mascot. I thought you said something totally different.
You better not say what.
No, we do not have a mascot, but that I actually thought about that. We could,
Should it be wind? Just
yeah, the Windjammers, right?
Might be
can't see
something.
it, but it's there.
We could take that to committee.
Okay, you think about that.
There was a lady who jumped out of an airplane once
As a
banana
in a
suit.
banana suit that could be your mascot.
All right.
Thank you, Mario.
Thank you, Haley. Councilman Halverson.
I don't have much to report other than we are having a public safety meeting on Thursday. And since most of that public safety committee is here, can I request that that be moved a half hour earlier to 1:30 versus 2 o'clock? Haley said it worked for her. Derek says yes. Sherry, does that work for? Oh, you're not in that one. I was thinking Sherry was in that one, but
Oh.
1:30?
1:30.
Yep, it's
Thank you.
changed.
Thanks.
All right,
What's that?
Dave.
Two things. One is really exciting, I think, and that is that the spring cleanup date is scheduled for April 24th. So that is the date that we have the dumpsters from Robinson Waste, and you can come and put your yard waste in those, and then those are rotated through. So additional details will come out as far as timing and whatnot, but I believe that will be at Canyon Meadows Park again on April 24th. So look forward to that. And the other report is that the website migration of information is complete. And now we need to go through and make sure all of the information is accurate, and make sure that some of the new pages that we had requested and we had identified wanting information on, that we get that content added. So we're hitting the home stretch. There's a few final steps here, but that is still in progress, and we're getting close.
That's great news. Thank you. Jamie, did you have anything?
No, nothing to report here. Thank you.
Sherry?
Nothing really heavy. You know, Councilmember Windsor earlier talked about some processes and stuff that can help improve developers' expectations and help improve staff's understanding of how things need to flow through Planning Commission. I actually took some time and met with Kim on Saturday morning, and she and I actually started on a couple of those things. You know, I sent this to the mayor the other day. Just even things like standardizing staff reports, how they're going to be reviewed. We've kind of mocked up a template for it. The next thing I want to do is sit down with her and get a really good understanding of, you know, the process, because I think I have a general understanding of when things go to council and when things go to commission. But I actually want to create, for lack of a better term, a flow chart that has some of the information like timelines and things like that, that'll actually go when it'll go with the development application. So that'll be part of the materials provided to developers and other land and any land use applicant. as part of their materials that they get from the city when they're preparing their original submission. And so those are just a couple things that we've started working on. And I only bring those up just because I think they both go a long way towards what Councilmember Windsor brought up earlier in terms of clarifying process and having everybody kind of on the same page when it comes to expectations.
That's great. Thank you, Sherry. All right, Lisa, did you have anything?
I do not, thank you.
And I don't know, is Michelle on here? She must have dropped. So I won't ask her. What's that? Okay, Wayne?
Mayor, and thanks for Haley and Angie for bringing this up, but I think the city would be remiss if we don't extend our condolences to the Peak family. Since our last meeting, Ray Peak is a tremendous man who's the fabric of this city, the culture, the character, his service to the city, the service to his fellow man. We lost a tremendous person for this community, and that family has lost a tremendous man as well. And I think as a city, we need to extend our condolences to this family, and our hearts go out to them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Wayne. The first time I met Ray Peak, and I've only talked to him a couple of times, but was when I went to give blood one time, and it was years ago, but he was there helping out. And I just remembered him so vividly because he had the kindest eyes, the most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen. And, you know, you could look, I felt like you could look right into his soul. He was just such a kind-hearted man, and I could tell that from the moment that I met him. He will be sorely missed in this community. So thank you for sharing that. All right, if there is no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.